This is Studio 809.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I am your host, Hiking Bob Falcone, and you can find everything you want to know about me on my website at hikingbob.com. This podcast is late, and it's because it's a topic I'm going to drift off of a little bit from my usual stuff and talk about something I think a little bit more important in today's political climate. Now, I know you all know that I don't talk about politics unless it pertains directly to outdoor recreation, but I think this is a little bit more important. And this has a lot to do with the freedom of the speech and freedom of the press and some current events that have happened in the political world that are, kind of important for all of us. So before we get started, let me just say that the murder of Charlie Kirk is reprehensible, it is indefensible, and just against anything to meaningful public discourse. The alleged shooter, in my opinion, should he be found guilty, should be subject to the most severe and harshest penalties for his despicable actions. I do not, nor should anyone, find joy or comfort in this murder. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today on the special 450th episode of my podcast. Instead, I'm going to talk about the fallout after the murder. Whether or not you were a follower or fan of Kirk, it must be acknowledged that the First Amendment of our Constitution gave him and you and me and everyone else within our borders the freedom to say whatever he wanted, short of libelous or slanderous statements. He himself would invoke the First Amendment when challenged on his statements and views. It is obvious that he believed in the First Amendment guarantees to speak his mind, free from government interference. This is what the First Amendment says. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So what does that mean? Well, simply put, the government is forbidden, except under very rare and extraordinary circumstances, from censoring your speech, from arresting you for your speech, from censoring the news media, or otherwise controlling how the news media operates. So while the news media generally strives to be even-handed in news reporting, it can actually be as one-sided as it wants, should it choose to, and there's really nothing that government can do about it. It's important to note that the news media world, there is typically a big separation in how news reporting or news gathering is done versus expressing their opinion. If you read a newspaper, any newspaper, there are reporters who go out there and try their best to do an even job of reporting the news. And then there's the editorial page, which expresses opinions. They generally are very separate from each other. And typically speaking, the one doesn't influence the other. The editorial page, if they're doing their job right, doesn't tell the reporters how to write their stories or how to slant them or anything like that. So there's typically a big separation in that, and sometimes people lose sight of that. While the news gathering part typically strives to be neutral, the opinion side of things can and do make little attempt to be even-handed, and that's okay. The opinion side of the page does not have to be neutral at all. There's no requirement for them to do that. It needs to be made clear that the protections guaranteed in the First Amendment only apply to the government. You can't be arrested for your speech, but you can be fired from your job if your employer doesn't like what you have to say. I can tell you to leave my home if I don't like your opinion. And you could be sued civilly, which is different than being arrested, if your speech can be shown to have caused some kind of harm to someone. You can't make a false accusation about somebody without the threat of maybe being sued over it. So what does this have to do with Charlie Kirk and Jimmy Kimmel? As I mentioned, Kirk was known to express his opinions, and they were protected by the First Amendment's guarantee of his freedom of speech. He didn't expect, or I imagine care, that you agree with his opinions or not, but he was free to say whatever was on his mind. Similarly, Jimmy Kimmel had the same exact rights as Kirk to express pretty much whatever opinions he wanted. Ideologically, Kimmel and Kirk are on opposite sides of the spectrum, but their rights to speak were the same. And if the language in the Constitution is a guide, their rights didn't change or go away on the whims of whatever politician happens to be in charge or a constantly changing popular opinion. Unfortunately, when Kimmel made his remarks on his TV show regarding Kirk's murder, the reaction from people, mostly those ideologically aligned with Kirk, were swift and brutal. He was condemned for his comments, which people found to be offensive. And as much as the First Amendment guaranteed his right to free speech, it also guaranteed people the right to voice their objection to what he said. But things got out of hand, in my opinion, when two things happened. First, and most egregiously, the head of the Federal Communications Commission threatened not only the ABC network, which produces and distributes the Kimmel Show, but also the broadcast licenses of every individual TV station that would air the Kimmel Show. Regular broadcast TV stations operate under licenses granted by the FCC to operate over the airwaves. It's a way to make sure that not every Tom, Dick, and Harry with an electronics background can build their own TV transmitter and create mayhem and confusion. In return, TV stations do agree to certain conditions, including agreeing to not broadcast, quote-unquote, indecent content or foul language. I watched a clip of what Kimmel said that caused the uproar with Kirk's followers and politicians, and nothing he said violated any FCC guidelines or rules. This would make the FCC chairman's threats to revoke the licenses of TV stations a clear violation of the Constitution. The only thing driving these threats against freedom of speech was Kirk's friendship with the President of the United States. They had no basis in law. His threats were so outrageous that even other members of the same party condemned or expressed concern over the threats. Secondly, according to published reports, some followers of Kirk, acting as private citizens, scoured the internet and social media for anyone who posted anything negative about Kirk or made light of his murder, which is reprehensible if you're making light of somebody's murder, but regardless. If they found any such post, they allegedly would then harass the poster and also their employer with the desired intention of having that person lose their job. Some politicians, presumably aligned also with Kirk, would publicly attack people who did the same. While this isn't a constitutional violation, I don't understand how you can defend your own speech as a right while attacking others for doing the same. And there's a word for that. It's called hypocrisy. And before you get ahead of me, I'm not giving the more liberal side of things a pass. People on the more liberal side of the spectrum have acted to restrict the speech of people they don't agree with for some time, but they hide it under the guise of canceling people or also engaging in harassing behavior. Neither side gets a pass or gets to claim the high ground in the battle over speech. Both sides behave badly. However, it is my belief that if you expect your speech to be free, you should extend the same to others. Free speech shouldn't be a one-way street. In fact, the concept of free speech simply doesn't work if it is a one-way street. Of course, no one is making you listen to words or speech that you don't like. You are free to change the channel, walk away, unsubscribe, block, or what have you, the speech you don't like or the people who say it. You can, as the First Amendment states, peaceably assemble to express your dissent to what someone else is saying. But if you're going to stand on the mantle of free speech, you need to understand one very important point. And this gets missed by a lot of people. The First Amendment isn't there to protect popular or agreeable or nice speech, because none of those need to be protected. In fact, it exists to protect unpopular, disagreeable, and not so nice speech. And regardless of which end of the political and ideological spectrum you fall on, if you think the current administration's attempt to curtail constitutionally protected speech is okay, you have to ask yourself if you feel the same if an administration on the opposite end of the political spectrum did the same. If you're okay with one side doing it and not the other, you fail at basic civics. And if you think that any government, regardless of what side of the political spectrum it is on, has any right to infringe on the rights guaranteed in the First Amendment, then you again fail at basic civics. because no government, regardless of whether they are conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican or anything in between, has any right to tell you, me, or anyone else what we can say or not say, regardless of who our language pisses off. Why am I doing this podcast way off of my usual topic matter? Because the right to free speech, the right to a free press, allows me to create these podcasts, to write my columns, and to do so without government interference. Do not let this or any government infringe on the right of free speech or a free press, regardless of whether you agree with said speech or press. Thanks for listening. My next podcast will be back on our usual topic matter. I promise. Talk to you later.